Welcome to Community Christian Church. My name is Ed Martin, and I'm one of the pastors here. And we're glad you're with us to start this new series, Anxiety Attack. For the next few weeks, I want to talk to you about what has become a huge problem in our country, our struggle with anxiety. In national surveys done over the last year or so, when people have been asked what is their biggest personal struggle, this has been the overwhelming response that it's anxiety. Over the last decade, we've seen a rise of anxiety among students like never before. In fact, anxiety has overtaken depression as the number one cause when college students are requesting counseling services. The American College Association found a significant increase in the last year. In 2016, 62% from 52% of undergraduates reported that they felt overwhelming anxiety in their life. In 1985, the Higher Education Research Institute at UCLA began asking incoming college freshmen if they felt overwhelmed by all they had to do. In 1986, 18% said they felt overwhelmed by what they had to do. In 2010, the number had grown to 29%. In that period of time, which is 15 years. Last year, it surged all the way to 41%. So I want to talk to you over the next few weeks about why it is that lots of us are feeling anxiety and worry and pressure. And really what I want to talk to you, all I want to talk to you about is what Jesus had to say, because Jesus has some really keen insight to our causes of worry and anxiety. In fact, what I want to describe to you over the next few weeks is I want to take you through the longest passage where Jesus talks about worry. And if you ever read anything on our current shelves about worry, you're going to find that way upwards of 85-90% of everything that's being written about anxiety and worry, Jesus originally said. And I don't think it's because people are just taking from Jesus without giving him credit. Even people who aren't religious wind up saying almost the same thing that Jesus winds up saying. I think it's because clinical research is backing up what Jesus said 2,000 years ago. And to get us started on this, I just want to say that because Jesus talks about this, and it's been 2,000 years since he talked about it, one of the things that we can get for sure out of that is that anxiety and worry are a fairly normal human condition because, again, it's been around all these thousands of years. Jesus wasn't in the habit of talking about things that people in his day didn't struggle with, and the fact that he talks about it for so long means that it was a common problem then. So all I want to do is over the next 3 weeks, I want to take you through this passage, and then I want to close by giving you an illustration of how to apply this and what Jesus has to say. And what I want to do today is I want to take you into what he says, but before I really make the point that he's making, I want to give you the overview, big picture before we go right to the scripture, just in case I'm not all that interesting to hold your attention. Jesus defines the problem so clearly, in fact, that once you hear what the problem is, you can almost work through what you need to do once you really buy into what the problem is. Here's what Jesus has to say. Jesus says that the things that you are most devoted to determine what you worry about. Now, what you worry about, it just reveals what you're most devoted to, that the things you're devoted to, those are the things that you wind up worrying about. You only worry about things that you're really devoted to. Now, that doesn't sound all that, incredibly insightful, but here's why it's important for us to get that. Most of us wind up thinking that worry and anxiety is an emotion, and so we try to deal with it emotionally. But Jesus and lots of research shows that worry and anxiety really aren't an emotional issue, they're a devotion issue. And then you have to work on it from a devotional kind of end, that worry reveals what I am most devoted to. I'll illustrate it to you like this, and some of you, this will be new information to you about me, and it'll be the reason you won't want to come to church here because you won't want a pastor that is this way. But this is just true about me, so there's really no need in hiding it. Others of you won't be surprised by this at all. Here's what I want you to know. I don't worry ever about your job. Not ever. I mean, if you emailed me or you came up to me when we saw each other in person and you told me you were about to lose your job, I would feel compassion for you. I would pray with you at that point if you wanted to do that. But when you walked away, I would go home at night and I would sleep like a baby. I never once will worry about your job. Here's another one. I never worry about your kids' grades. I don't spend any time worrying about how your kid's doing in school. Again, if you tell me they're not doing very well and you're worried about how are they going to do okay in life because they're struggling in school, I will pray with you about your kids' grades. I will listen to you compassionately about the struggle you have, but I will not sit at home and worry about your kids. You know why? Because I'm not devoted to your kids' grades and I'm not devoted to your job. I'm not worried about your retirement. I hope if you want to retire early that you get to retire early, but I won't spend any amount of time worrying about your retirement. And the reason is because I have not devoted myself to helping you figure out how to retire effectively. You see, my worries are just like your worries. They're tied to the things that I'm really devoted to. And I'm not devoted to your kids or your health or your job or your finances. I'm devoted to things that I'm devoted to. Here's the question. Since your devotion, your worry reveals what you're devoted to, here's the question we need to ask. What would happen if you shifted your devotion? What would happen to your worries if you shifted your devotion? That's the big thought that Jesus is going to get to in this whole discussion with worry. But he doesn't say it as directly as I just said it. He wants you to discover it. And so I want to take you on the journey that he takes you on, but that's the big point. To get at this, Jesus starts in Matthew chapter 6. So if you want to read this later, and I'm going to encourage you to do that, this is found in Matthew chapter 6. And when he starts to talk about anxiety and worry, he begins by talking to us about money, which is interesting because for a lot of us, money's one of the big things we worry about, money and stuff and how we're going to do financially and how we're going to handle all the things we need to handle with money and stuff. It was then, apparently, since Jesus talked about it, and is now one of the biggest causes of what people are anxious about. But when he starts to talk about anxiety and worry, that's where he starts. Now, I'm going to put this verse on the screen, and I want you to read along with me on the screen, and then I'm going to get to a point, and at Ashley Park and here at Sharpsburg, I want you to say out loud, I want you to answer my question about what you see on the screen. Here's how it goes. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be, what's the next word? Isn't it devoted? You're going to see that word again. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Now, the word translated money in this particular translation is originally the word Mammon, and it's a god of stuff. It literally means stuff. Literally, Jesus is saying, you cannot serve both God and stuff. You cannot love God and your stuff, to which we think, I don't really get what he's saying there. I love God, and I really like my stuff. Jesus says you can't have them on the same level. You're going to have to decide which one you're most devoted to. And then he goes right into the very next thought, and just so I can show you that he is in fact connecting these two thoughts, it starts with this connecting word. He says, therefore, because I said to you, you can't, love both God and your stuff, therefore, he says, I tell you, do not worry about your life. Now, that's pretty general. Don't worry about your life. Get more specific. What you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. He then says, all he's saying to them is, hey, look, I know what you think about every day. And in their culture, it was a very poor culture. It was a desert country, and they didn't have a lot of way to preserve food, and they didn't have a lot of food because it's hard to grow without a lot of rain. So he said, I know that most of you get up every day and you're worried about, what am I going to eat? Where am I going to get something to drink? Where am I going to eat? Where am I going to drink? It's a hand-to-mouth kind of society. That's what they were most concerned about. What am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to wear? Now, the truth is, most of us, that's not what we are really most concerned about. You don't wake up and most of you worry if you're going to have something to eat. You may wonder about if it's going to be what you want to eat, but it's not going to be that you're not thinking you're going to have something to eat or drink, or that you're going to have something to wear. So I think if Jesus, and this is just my guess, I think if Jesus were saying this to us, he would say, don't worry about whether or not your kids are going to get into that school. Don't worry about whether or not you're going to be able to retire. Don't worry whether or not you'll be single, or whether you'll get married, or whether you'll have kids, or whether your car is going to be okay. Don't worry about your life. Don't worry about that. And to which we say, Jesus, are you saying I shouldn't worry about those things because they aren't important? No, I'm not saying that at all. In fact, I hope I can help you see that the point he's making is not that certainly food and drink aren't important. You got to eat, you got to drink. And he isn't saying that your retirement's not important, that your kid's education isn't important, that your health isn't important. His point is those things are important, but because they're related to things that are happening in the future, you have no control over the future. And in some cases, the things that you're most concerned about, they're not going to work out the way that you want them to work out. But still, even though you have no control over it and they won't work out the way you want them to, that is no reason for you to worry. You say, you can have uncertainty, Jesus is saying, and not worry about it today. Jesus says, when it comes to your life, however you define that, whatever you think is really important, I say to you, you should stop worrying about your life. He goes on, is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Now, all Jesus is doing here is he's asking you to pull back from your hyper-focus that anxiety and worry cause you to do, to get hyper-focused and say, I don't know if you've ever really be able to retire, and I don't know if I'll ever have all the things I want, and I don't know if my kids are going to be okay, and you get really focused in, I don't know if I'll get married, I don't know if I get all of that, and Jesus just says, wait a second. For a moment, I want you to step back. Is life not more than retirement? In other words, if somebody said to you, what is life? You wouldn't answer, well, life is retirement. Is life not more than retirement? Life doesn't equal retirement. Life doesn't equal your job. Life doesn't equal your kids. Life doesn't equal your health. Is life not more than all of those things? To which we'd say, yeah, it's more than that. It's more than that. This thing is really, really important. That's what I'm trying to say. But if you want to know, does it equal life? No, it doesn't equal life. And then he says, well, then let me help you with your worry. I want you to pull back from this thing that you get hyper-focused on. And then here's what I want you to do. I want you to think for a second, how insensitive would it be if I were the one saying this to you? This isn't me, this is Jesus. Jesus says, so you're hyper-focused, I want you to pull back, those things aren't really life. And he says, here's what I want you to do. Why don't you look at the birds? What? Yeah, why don't you just look at the birds? I know you're hyper-focused, so why don't you look at the birds in the air? Jesus, I don't have time to look at the birds of the air. I need a job. Jesus, I don't have time to think about the birds of the air. I have cancer. Jesus, look, my son is failing. My son is rebellious. I don't have time to think of, good grief, are you kidding me? I don't have time to go outside and look at the birds. I think Jesus would say, no. I'm just trying to help you with your worry. You're so worried and you're so anxious. And I think what you should do is, I think you should consider the birds. I'm not saying these things aren't important. I'm not saying your health's not important. I'm not saying retirement's not important. I'm certainly not saying that your kids aren't important. I'm just saying that your emotion follows what you're most devoted to, and it's just this big cycle. You think it's all emotion-driven, but it's not. You're really focused on this one thing. I want you to step back from this thing, which really isn't your life, you would agree with, and I want you to pull back from the focus, and my advice is, go out and look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store in barns. Now again, he is addressing their culture because that's what people had to do. They were worried about did I plant enough food? Am I going to be able to reap enough food? Am I going to be able to store? Am I going to have enough for my family? And he's just addressing in their culture. And he would say to us, hey, I just want you to step back and look at the birds and ask yourself, birds don't retire. Birds don't send their kids off to college. They don't hold their kids' hands every moment and worry if their kids are going to be safe or not. In fact, birds build their nest way, way up high. And when their kids are ready, they push them out of the nest and go, hope that goes okay for you. He just says, this is really important. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to step back. I want you to pull back from the emotion you feel and realize it's a devotion issue. You're focused on this thing and step back, and I want you to look at the birds. And I want you to notice they're not doing anything about all this stuff. Now, here's what I want you to note. I don't want you to read this verse and think, well, Jesus is saying, I just shouldn't do anything. You know, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to work. I don't have to try. If it's meant to be, God will just bring it about. That is not what he's saying. If you watch birds for a little bit, you'll notice that birds get up in the morning, they go out and they peck in the dirt, and they look around to see what God has already provided. But they don't do any of the stuff that you and I do to make it happen and focus on the future and are we going to be able to get this done? They don't do any of those things that we think we have to do. And Jesus says, but God takes care of them. And then he asked a question that was real easy for that culture to answer. Might not be so easy for us because of our focus on animals, to be honest. He says, are you not more valuable than birds? Now again, it was really easy for them. They got that Jesus was implying, and they knew, yeah, human beings are more important than birds. Jesus is certainly implying to our culture, even though maybe it doesn't appear that way all the time, God takes care of birds, and he'll take care of you because you're more valuable to him than a bird. Now, I know that's really simplistic, and it's probably not really what you were hoping to get out of this anxiety thing, but I hope you'll keep tracking with this, because what Jesus is trying to do is he's really trying to help you with your anxiety and your worry. Jesus says, look, you're going to face a lot of uncertainty, and there are going to things come up, and you're not going to know whether you're not going to know whether you're ever going to get a job tomorrow or not. You're not going to know whether everything's going to work out that way with your kid or not. You may be single and you not know if you're going to get the person to marry you want to, and you don't. But even though you have uncertainty about all those things, you don't need to worry about whether or not that's going to go the way that you want to. I'm not saying you shouldn't care, he says. I'm not saying you shouldn't do what you should do. I know all about the uncertainty of tomorrow, and I know you don't know whether it's going to work out the way you want to. He's saying, I just don't want you to worry about those kind of things. And just so you know, Jesus' point is not, hey, don't worry about that kind of stuff. Everything happens for a reason, and it's all going to work out in the end. He's not saying that. That's not even Christianity. That's like fatalism or luck or magic or something. Jesus isn't saying any of that stuff. He's not saying, I want you to trust your life to luck or things working out or circumstances just go and it'll all be okay. If it's meant to be, it'll be. Jesus is not saying trust any of that stuff. He's saying you should trust your Father in heaven who takes care of birds, and you matter more to him than birds. You should trust your Father in heaven. He cares about you. That's what Jesus is saying. Now, then it's as if Jesus is saying, okay, maybe that doesn't even help you a lot, so let me ask you another question. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? He's just saying, look, why don't you all if I didn't help you with the bird thing, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just set aside an hour, and I want you to really get focused on, am I going to have any children? I want you to get really focused on, am I going to be able to go to college? I want you to really focus on your health. I want you to focus on it and focus on it and focus on it and worry on it and worry on it and worry on it. And then at the end of the hour, I want you to ask yourself the question, did I actually help myself any during that hour? Did I add anything to my life? Like, do I think I got any additional time out of my life by all the worry I did in that time? Or let me ask you the whole thing another way. Can you, by worrying, bring any certainty to tomorrow? Can you sit here today and go through all of the what if and then I'll and then if this happens, then will. And if you go through all of those scenarios, he's saying, can you bring any certainty about what's going to happen to you tomorrow? He's saying, look, there's uncertainty about tomorrow. There's no value that you can add to your life by spending your life on it now. He said, so instead, look at the birds of the air. And if you don't like that one, he says, look at the flowers of the field. Notice how God takes care of the flowers. And remember, you matter more to God than birds and flowers. And you've done all you know to do. I mean, you filled out an application and you're going to school and you loved your kids and you set limits and you tried to give them a right place and you didn't try to overdo for them. You've tried to get everything in the right place, but in the end, you cannot control what happens tomorrow. So, like birds and flowers, you need to trust God who cares for birds and flowers, and you matter more to Him than that. And so I'm not going to worry. And I'm not going to worry not because I know what's going to happen. And I'm not going to worry because I think, well, everything just works out. Things don't always go the way you want to. I'm not going to worry because I know that there's nothing my worrying can do to fix the future. And I know that I matter to God. And then Jesus drives the point home. He says, look, worry and anxiety, they're really devotion issues. And I know you don't like to hear that, but worry and anxiety, this is really a faith issue. That's why he ends that by saying, "O you of little faith." See, our emotions get attached to things, and they get attached to the things that we are most devoted to. Jesus says, the reason it's difficult for you to pull away and to step back and get, hey, this thing isn't life. The reason it's hard for you to trust me with this thing about the uncertainty of tomorrow, the reason it's hard for you to live like the birds and trust that God cares about you more is because your emotion has got hooked on this thing, and they're important issues. They really are. He talked about some big one to people. He didn't say to people, hey, don't worry, you don't ever need to eat. You don't need to drink. He doesn't discount the need. His point is you shouldn't worry about anything. His point is that you don't worry about any of those things because your Father in heaven cares about you. Do you trust your Father in heaven? O you of little faith. Now, this is really, really hard for those of us who struggle with worry and anxiety to hear. But worry and anxiety reveal to us that we have little or no confidence in God's ability to take care of us. And I know where you get stuck on this. You get stuck on this the same place I get stuck on this. The problem you have is not whether God is able to take care of your problem. The problem is not, do you think God could help you have children or could get you a mate or could get you a job. The problem is not that you don't think God can do it. The problem you get hung on is, I don't know what He will do. I believe that God could take care of my cancer. I believe that God could take care of my kid. I believe He could take care of my finances. I believe God could get me a job. I believe God could do that. The problem I have is I don't know what He will do. I just don't know. And I've asked you this before, but the end, you have to really deal with this. What would your life look like if you really did believe that God could be trusted with your future? What would you wake up like every day? What would you do today if you really did trust God cares about me and He'll take care of my future? See, you're never going to stop anxiety by trying to figure out all the ways that you can get control of your future. You're never going to control it by figuring out how everything can be lined up a certain kind of way, because the truth is, every day of your life, your future has been uncertain. Sometimes you're aware of it, sometimes you're not aware of it. But every day since the moment you were born, the next moment has always been uncertain. You did not know what was going to happen, and you've had no way to control what was going to happen in the future. Jesus is saying, all he's saying to you is, just like with birds and flowers, here you are at this point. God has been faithful to get you to this point. Can he not be trusted with the next point? God has gotten you to now, and maybe it hasn't all gone the way you want to, but here you are in the now. Can you trust him with the next now? Can you trust him with the future? I mean, I know your marriage has changed, and I know your kids have changed, and I know your health has changed. What about God has changed? See, in the end, our anxiety and worry, it's a faith issue. It reveals a devotion issue. That's why Jesus says, oh, you have little faith. Worry is a faith issue. Now, we're going to stop here this week, and we're going to continue on in the rest of this passage. I haven't shown you everything that Jesus teaches yet, and that's why we're going to go on in this series. But before we end, I want to give you an assignment. I want to point out some things to you, and these are on the back of your connection card, so I hope you'll turn it over. They're listed as next steps, and you can grab an extra one if you want to take one of these home. And I'm hoping that you'll choose to do one of these kind of things. And the first thing that I want to say to you is, one of the things that Jesus pointed out to us is that we've already noticed. Here's one of the things we learned already in this first week of this, is that worry is just a huge waste of your time. Who of you by worry can add a single hour to your life? I mean, in the end, here's what you know. Your life and the amount of time you have, those are the same thing. Life and time. When you run out of time, you run out of life. Jesus says, worry, you can't do anything with worry about the amount of time that you have. In fact, most of us, if I said to you, does worry add anything to the thing you're most devoted to? You'd go, no. So in the end, worry is a waste of your time. So here's one of the things that you can begin to do this week to begin to coach yourself on dealing with anxiety and worry. When your brain starts to kick over and you begin to feel that feeling of anxiety that reveals what you're most devoted to, when you get to that point, the thing that you have no certainty about, the thing you have no control over, what makes you wonder about tomorrow, here's what you can begin to say to yourself. You can go, this I'm feeling does nothing for my future, and it's causing me to waste time now. When I waste time, I waste my life. I will not waste my life doing something that accomplishes nothing. Worry is a waste of my life. You can talk yourself through it. You can begin to coach yourself through it. Worry causes me time that accomplishes nothing. I will not waste time because time equals life. I will not worry and waste my life. The second thing that we've learned is that when I get involved in this, that we're supposed to do what we can do. I'm supposed to sow and reap and do all of those kind of things. So if you're worried about a job, of course you need to fill out applications. And if you're worried about, getting married at some point, you maybe need to work on your personality. Maybe some of you need to take a bath. I don't know. Maybe you need to work on some things and you need to get around people. You need to do what you can do. But once you have done all that you can do, then when that emotion begins to reveal, I'm really devoted to this thing and I'm worried that I should do more. When you get to the end of the night and you're laying in bed and you're worried about this thing, I'm going to be alone or I'm never going to have kids. When you have done everything you can do, here's what you need to say to yourself. I have done everything that I can do in this moment. I'm going to trust what I can't do to my Father who cares about me more than birds or flowers. I've done everything that I can do. I've filled out applications. I've gone to work on things. I've learned what I can learn. I've given my kids love and limits. I've done everything that I can do. I'm going to trust God to do what only God can do. I've been responsible with my now. I'm going to trust God with the next now. Then the third thing that I want you to think about, and this one is a deeper one. And Jesus makes this one really clear, and we're going to talk about this even more next week, is that worry, it feels like an emotion to us, but it really is a devotion kind of issue. if your emotion is driven by this devotion you're feeling, here's the question you need to begin to get at. What is it you are most devoted to that's driving this emotion? And if you want to know what you're most devoted to, all you simply have to look at is, what do you worry about most? Because next week, we're going to hear what Jesus has to say, and He's going to give us the opportunity to take care of that worry by shifting your devotion. This is why Jesus' statement at the end of this section is so powerful. He says, the reason you worry is because you have such little faith in God. I mean, if somebody were to come and just to watch us live, if somebody were to watch those of us who struggle with anxiety and worry, here's the conclusion they would come to. You have much more faith in your ability to figure out all the stuff in the future and all the things that you're going to do and all the hyper focus that you get on what you can do and how you're going to control things that you can't control. You have much more faith in your ability to figure things out than the amount of faith you have in God, who does know about the future. Because of the way we work and the way we worry and the way we focus and the way we talk and the way we get so hyper-focused on all the scenarios that we're going to run them through, you have way more faith, if I just look at the way you live, in that than you do in the God who cares about you more than birds and flowers. So the question I have to ask myself, if worry pinpoints my devotion, what am I most devoted to? And am I giving my life to something that will not pay off? And should I be devoting myself more to a God who I can trust? Now, if you hear all of those things and you say to yourself, yeah, I'm not going to do any of those things, I got one more for you. Would you just this week, would you read Matthew chapter 6? You know, if you just take this section that we're going to look at for the next couple of weeks and you'd read Matthew chapter 6, 25 through 34, if you just read that, if you don't want to read it, if you'd put the Bible app on your phone or tablet, the Bible app will read it to you every morning. Just say, hey, read to me Matthew chapter 6, 25 through 34. Would you be willing to just read that straight through? I'd love for you to do it every day this coming week. If not, then would you read it through one time? And here's what I say. If you would begin to read that through and you would hear those words, you'd have it read it to you, here's what I predict. Something in one of those verses is going to pop at you, and you're going to begin to go, I hadn't thought about that way. And it's going to reveal to you something that's going on in your heart and life that's causing you anxiety and worry. Not simply, and we can begin to change that once you begin to identify it. And what I really hope in this series is that you and I can do something to deal with this problem that is a problem for many of us around anxiety and worry. Not just so we can have a little series where I can teach you the words of Jesus and give you an illustration of how this works out in somebody's life, but so you and I can beat this problem and we can get on with trusting the God who loves us. Because if Jesus commanded us to stop worrying, it means it's something we can do. We have to assume that there's a way out. And in this amazing passage we're going to spend time with, He gives us the way out. I pray you'll at least take time to read it and let it soak in on you. Let me pray for you as we end. Father, thank you for this opportunity we have to hear your words about our anxiety and worry. Help us to trust you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.